What if I told you that one love story caused the death of thousands, sparked a 10-year war, and burned an empire to the ground? The story of the Trojan War doesn't begin with heroes or battles or glory. It begins with a single moment, a choice, and a girl who never asked for a destiny as heavy as history itself. Before the fires of Troy lit up the night sky, before the horror and the heartbreak, the Greeks launched an armada unlike anything the ancient world had ever seen. Over 1,000 ships cutting through the morning mist, an entire world sailing toward one city. And why? Because of a face. Helen of Sparta, just 18 years old, whose beauty would echo through the ages. For her, kings would rage, empires would fall, and legends would be born. But this story doesn't begin with Helen herself. It begins with something far smaller and far deadlier, a golden apple, thrown at a divine wedding out of spite, a single spark that would ignite a chain of choices, betrayals, and battles that would shape the world for generations. This is the real story of the Trojan War, the story of how love became obsession, how pride became ruin, and how a single moment of jealousy brought an empire to its knees. And it all begins with a golden apple. After that single golden apple fell, the world of gods and mortals shifted forever. It was thrown by Eris, the goddess of chaos, furious at being excluded from a divine celebration on Mount Olympus. And in an instant, harmony shattered. 3 goddesses reached for the apple, each believing she alone was the fairest. Hera, the queen of the gods, Athena, goddess of wisdom and war, and Aphrodite, goddess of love. Their rivalry shook Olympus itself. No god dared to choose between them. No immortal wanted to face the wrath of even one, let alone all 3. So the impossible decision fell not to a god, but to a mortal. Paris, prince of Troy, young, handsome, raised far from palace politics among the quiet hills and shepherds. A man who never asked for greatness, and yet stood on the edge of destiny. One by one, the goddesses appeared before him in radiant splendor, each offering him a gift powerful enough to shape the world. Hera promised dominion, the throne over all kingdoms of men. Athena offered unmatched wisdom, glory and victory in every battle. And Aphrodite, she offered love, not simple affection, but the heart of the most beautiful woman alive, Helen of Sparta. To Paris, the choice should have been impossible. But the promise of a love that felt divine pulled him toward Aphrodite, and in choosing her, the winds of fate began to howl. There was one small detail Paris overlooked. Helen was already married, and her husband, King Menelaus of Sparta, was not a man to be robbed without consequence. When Helen vanished across the sea, taken under Aphrodite's shimmering protection, Menelaus's rage erupted like wildfire. He called upon his brother Agamemnon, High King of the Greeks. He invoked ancient oaths sworn by lords and warriors across the land. And Greece answered, not with negotiation, not with mercy, but with war. 1,000 ships began to gather beneath the rising sun, and the world braced for the storm that was coming. When Menelaus discovered Helen was gone, fury consumed him. But this was no ordinary outrage. This was a king humiliated, a husband robbed, a vow broken. And the laws of their world were clear. Every king who had once sought Helen's hand, every ruler who had sworn to protect her marriage, was now bound by oath to avenge her. One by one, across the mountains and islands of Greece, messengers rode out beneath storm-dark skies. And everywhere the message arrived, kings lifted their swords. They gathered under the command of Agamemnon, the High King of Mycenae, a man whose ambition matched the size of the war he was about to lead. Soon, harbors across the Aegean swelled with warriors, more men than the world had ever seen in one place, and among them, legends. Odysseus, king of Ithaca, clever, calm, a strategist whose mind was as sharp as any blade. Ajax, towering and relentless, a warrior said to be strong as 10 men. And Achilles, young, fierce, almost godlike, the Greeks' deadliest weapon, destined for glory, and tragedy. Armor clashed, sails unfurled. The wind howled as if it knew what was coming. When the final ship pushed off the shore, the sea turned black with sails, row upon row, carrying kings, champions, and the rage of an entire nation. More than 1,000 ships cutting toward a single city. This was no rescue mission, no simple quest. This was the beginning of a war that would last a decade, fueled by honor, revenge, and the pride of men who refused to be denied. Troy had no idea what was sailing toward them, and the world was about to burn. While the Greeks sailed with fire burning in their hearts, Troy prepared for war with fear tightening in theirs. Because unlike the Greeks, who chose this path, the Trojans never sought this conflict. They never asked for it, and they never stole Helen. But they would pay the price all the same. Among Troy's defenders stood a man whose name would echo through thousands of years, Hector, Prince of Troy, a warrior shaped not by pride, but by duty, a father, a husband, a leader who fought not for glory, but for the people who looked to him for hope. He stood at the gates with calm, steady strength, knowing he faced an enemy driven by vengeance and led by warriors of almost mythic renown. Years passed, battles raged. Neither side gained the advantage. The war consumed men, families, and nations. Yet victory never came. And then, one day, tragedy struck in a way no one could have foreseen. Achilles, the Greeks' greatest champion, had withdrawn from battle, angry over a bitter dispute with King Agamemnon. Without him, the Greeks began to fall. To save them, Achilles' closest friend, Patroclus, took up his armor, not to deceive the Trojans, but to inspire the Greeks who believed their champion had returned. But fate had a different plan. On the battlefield, Hector saw the familiar armor and believed he faced the unstoppable Achilles himself. They clashed beneath a scorching sun. Spears struck shields, bronze rang like thunder, and in the chaos of war, Hector delivered the fatal blow. But when the dust settled, the truth hit him like a spear to the heart. He had not slain Achilles. He had killed Patroclus. News of Patroclus's death reached Achilles like a blade to the soul. Grief hit him first, then came the rage. A rage beyond reason, beyond mercy. A rage so terrible the gods themselves could hardly watch. Achilles returned to the battlefield, a storm of wrath, cutting through Trojan ranks as if possessed. He came for one man, Hector. Their duel shook the earth beneath them. Steel flashed, dust swirled. Two of the greatest warriors on earth collided with destiny weighing on their shoulders. But the gods were silent, and fate had already chosen its victor. Achilles struck Hector down. Troy lost its greatest defender, its heart, its shield, its hope. But Achilles' fury did not end with victory. In a moment so cruel the heavens turned their gaze away, he tied Hector's body to his chariot and dragged him across the dust, a sight the world would never forget. And with that act, the war descended into a darkness from which neither side would ever truly return. Achilles' rage tore across the battlefield like a storm that refused to die. Wherever he stepped, Trojans fled. Wherever his spear fell, shields shattered. He fought with the fury of a man who had lost the other half of his soul, and for a moment it seemed nothing could stop him. But in the world of ancient heroes, even the greatest warrior carries a single shadow, a single weakness, a single thread that fate can pull. And Achilles' fate was already being woven. High above the battlefield the gods watched, some with pity, some with fear, and one with purpose. Apollo, the god of archery and prophecy, had seen enough of the bloodshed, enough of Achilles' wrath, enough of a war spiraling beyond even divine control. So he guided the hand of a mortal, Paris, the prince whose choice had begun this entire tragedy, stood trembling atop the walls of Troy, bow in hand. He was no match for Achilles, not in strength, not in skill, not in courage. But with a god behind him, he didn't need to be. As Achilles surged forward in pursuit of another Trojan warrior, Apollo whispered to Paris, a breath, a command, a cruel nudge from fate itself. Paris drew his bow. The world seemed to slow just for a moment. The string tightened. The arrow flew. Not toward Achilles' heart, not toward his armor, but toward the one place his mother could not protect, his heel. The arrow struck true. Achilles stumbled. The earth shook as the unstoppable force finally fell. The warrior, destined for eternal glory, had met the only destiny he could never outrun. The greatest hero of Greece, the man feared by armies, loved by the gods, blessed and cursed at birth, was gone. The battlefield fell silent. Even the wind held its breath. The Greeks carried Achilles' body from the field, mourning the warrior who had carried them through a decade of war. But with his death, the war did not end. It only grew darker, more desperate, more tragic. Because without Achilles, the Greeks were weaker, and Troy, though wounded, still stood. The war was far from over, and the final blow had not yet fallen. With Achilles gone, the Greeks stood on the edge of defeat. 10 years of war had worn them down. Their greatest champion was dead, their armies exhausted, their hope fading like smoke over the sea. But among kings and warriors, there was one man whose strength wasn't in his sword, but in his mind. Odysseus, the king of Ithaca, a thinker, a strategist, a man who believed that the most powerful weapon in war was deception. He knew the Greeks could not win with force, so he proposed something unthinkable, a gift, a massive wooden horse, tall as Troy's walls, silent as a secret, an offering to the Trojans, meant to be accepted, celebrated, welcomed. But inside its hollow belly, Greek soldiers waited in the dark. The plan was simple. The Greeks would pretend to retreat, burn their tents, sail away, disappear beyond the horizon. And once the Trojans pulled the horse inside their walls, the hidden soldiers would slip out at night, open the gates, and let the Greek army return under the cover of darkness. It was madness, it was brilliance, it was the beginning of the end. When the Trojans discovered the horse abandoned on the beach, the city erupted with debate. Some saw it as a sign of surrender. Some believed it was a gift to the gods. Some simply wanted the war to be over. But one woman knew the truth. Cassandra, the cursed princess of Troy, gifted with visions of the future, cursed so that no one would ever believe her. She cried out that the horse would destroy them. She begged them to burn it, break it, return it to the sea. But her words fell like rain on marble, unheard, unwanted. And so, with cheering crowds and ringing triumph, the Trojans dragged the horse through their gates. They celebrated deep into the night. Wine, dancing, music, a decade of fear washed away in a single moment of joy. Then, silence. In the darkest hour before dawn, the hatch of the horse opened. Greek soldiers crept out, shadows cutting across moonlit streets. They slipped silently to the gates, unbarred them, and miles offshore, where all lights had been extinguished, the Greek fleet turned around. Troy slept, too trusting, too triumphant. The Greeks stormed the city in a wave of fire and steel. Doors shattered, homes burned, families fled through smoke-choked streets. The city that had stood for centuries, the jewel of the East, was swallowed by flames. By morning, Troy was ash, a fallen empire. A caution whispered through history, all because of a gift no one should have accepted. By dawn, the screaming had stopped. The fires had gone quiet, and Troy, the great city, the proud city, the city that had once rivaled kingdoms, was gone. Smoke drifted over blackened stone. Walls that had stood for centuries now cracked and crumbled under their own weight. The palace where kings once ruled lay in ruins, swallowed by fire and shadow. Survivors stumbled through the wreckage, mothers searching for children, soldiers dragging wounded friends, families carrying what little remained of their lives. And in the midst of this devastation stood Helen, the woman at the center of the storm, returned to Menelaus, as if the war had undone nothing, as if the last 10 years had been a nightmare the world could simply wake from, but nothing was the same. Menelaus looked at her not with triumphant joy, but with a grief so deep it hollowed his victory. He had won her back, yet lost everything else. And Helen, once the pride of Sparta, now carried a weight too heavy for youth. A decade of blood spilled in her name, cities burned, heroes slain, a world reshaped by desire, vengeance, and fate. As the Greek army sailed away, their ships cutting through gray waters beneath a silent sky, the ruins of Troy smoldered behind them, a graveyard of heroes and dreams. But even in destruction, the story refused to die, because this war was never just about walls and warriors. It was about something deeper, something timeless. Long after the fires faded and the last echoes of battle were swallowed by time, the tale lived on, waiting to be told again.